It's punk rock bowling time. That's right, for the 24th year, one of the greatest festivals on earth, in my opinion, returns to downtown Las Vegas the weekend of May 25th, 26th, and 27th. I have had some of my greatest times playing this thing and just hanging out at this thing. You want to know how much this festival speaks to Turned Out a Punk's mindset? The headliners are Devo, Descendants, and Madness. Every day of this festival, the lineup is stacked with amazing bands of all types and stripes of punk and hardcore from all different eras, from ska to post-hardcore. We're talking like Bratmobile to Rock from the Crypt to Stiff Little Fingers to the Cosmic Psychos to Scowl to Chad. And then there's also all these late night after shows which are happening. And you wouldn't believe the lineup of these things, from the Zeros to Agnostic Front and everything in between. This festival is out of control for fans of punk. So I hope I will see you there, because this isn't like some sort of festival that you just go to and the bands are secluded in some sort of backstage area. Bands and fans and just punks alike are all just taking over downtown Las Vegas. So you turn around and all of a sudden you're gambling beside John Doe from X. I don't know if John Doe gambles, but if you turn around on the buffet line, you'll probably see me. And you better believe we're going to be talking about punk music. And because this festival loves this podcast as much as this podcast loves this festival, Punk Rock Bowling is bringing you a series of special episodes. So each and every week, I will have an episode going up featuring someone that's playing this festival. And hot damn, are there some good ones coming. Head over to punkrockbowling.com and hopefully I see you in downtown Las Vegas, May 25th, 26th, and 27th. Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk Splits, where we bring back two or more former guests of the show to discuss punk with me again. And today, coming back to the show, both featured on the Live in Philadelphia episode from way back when, my buddies, Dan Yemin and Andy Nelson. They play together, of course, in the fantastic Paint It Black, Open City. Actually, they also played together in Lifetime, too, for a bit. And then also Andy plays in Dark Blue, Ceremony, Affirmative Action Jackson, and Dan was in Resurrection and Kid Dynamite. Legends. And two good friends of mine and each other. You're going to hear it all in a second. We celebrate friendship in one moment. But first, to get in touch with this podcast, hit up the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and normally guest booker extraordinaire, but I booked this one all by myself, the great Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram at Left for Damian. There is a Turned Out a Punk YouTube page. There's a Turned Out a Punk TikTok page. There's a Turned Out a Punk Facebook page. There's a Turned Out a Punk Instagram page. All those are found at Turned Out a Punk on those respective platforms. Tell all your friends about this show. Let them know that we got good conversations over here at Turned Out a Punk. Check out my band. I play in a band. We're called Fucked Up. You can find out more information at fuckedup.cc on the old internet, or at Fucked Up on social media platforms. Those are handled by Mike from the band. All right, that is it. On to today's show. Today on the show, as I said off the top, it's Turned Out a Punk Splits, which means we got two guests returning to the show. Years ago, Chris O'Toole, host of Turned Out a Punk Footnotes, the long dormant Turned Out a Punk Footnotes, and myself went on a road trip and did live Turned Out a Punk episodes in cities, not all over the East Coast, but a bunch of cities along the United States East Coast, including a amazing night in Philadelphia where we had a array of guests. We discussed this all on the show. And two of those guests were my buddies, Andy and Dan. Andy and Dan, well, I've been fans of their work for years. I've worked with Andy playing shows in my band and him putting on shows for years, and seen their bands together for a long time. So these are my buddies. These are my pals. And took a long time to get this together for the second time. We recorded that first episode years ago, but now we are doing it. And it's because they got records they want to talk about. Well, they don't want to talk about them, but they want me to talk about them. And I'm happy to talk about them because Paint It Black is back. That's right. The band that those two guys together play with, Josh and Jared, and they are back, and they got a new record out on Revelation Records. It is called Famine, and you can pick it up wherever you pick up your records. A fantastic record. Great lyrics as always from Dan, and you will enjoy this. And also, I can't believe that now that I'm looking at the date of this thing, I guess it's coming up to the 20th anniversary of Paint It Black's Paradise, which came out way back when in 2005. It is being reissued on J-Tree, I guess the new J-Tree, J-Tree, JTAF. Anyway, it's on J-Tree through Epitaph, and you can pick up both those records and go and see Paint It Black in person at the Echo or Chain Reaction or Neck of the Woods in San Francisco, Anaheim, and Los Angeles in going back through reverse orders of those. Anyway, find out more information over at paintitblack.bandcamp.com. And that is it for me. Sit back and enjoy Andy and Dan on Turned Out a Punk Splits. Andy and Dan, welcome back to Turned Out a Punk.
Hey, man, it's nice to be here.
It's been a minute. This is like, I feel like both of you were very elusive guests to get on the podcast the first time. There was near misses with both of you coming on the show. And then you came on the live show and we teased part twos immediately. And here we are years later, finally doing it. But
I don't want to speak for Dan, but I didn't want, I know you asked me back when you first started, but I think at the time I told you, let's wait until episode like 1500. I want to like really wait until you've had every other person on, and then we'll come in.
He's like, you haven't earned it. You haven't earned an Andy appearance yet. You got to put in the work. You got to get it.
That's just how low I feel I am on the totem pole.
Dan was also one of the few people that I had like an in-person near miss with. Yeah. Where we were supposed to do it at Philly, and then we just couldn't meet up with each other, and then you had to go get home, and so we didn't get a chance to do the episode in person that night.
You guys were playing one of the, I think, the single cycle, like in my neighborhood, walking to the house, and I came by during sound check, and I don't remember if you weren't there or just I had to run and we didn't have time. I had like babies at the time, so it was like,
yeah, it's a lot more understandable. The other person that stood me up in person type thing. I don't mean stood me up. I mean, like, I totally understand. With kids, it's a total excuse. If Andy had done this shit, I would have been pissed. But with you, it's kids.
Andy just ditched you to like alphabetize his record collection.
Exactly.
And this is some breeder shit right now. You're ganging up on me.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's what we do. We breed our children to fight for us in the future and fight for our resources.
Yeah.
But the other guy that did it with me was the guy from Papa Roach, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm just going to catch a workout, and then I'll come to your hotel room, record this thing." And I'm like, "Okay, for sure." And I never saw him again. So thank you for not Papa Roaching me, Dan.
Yeah, that terminology is problematic for me, but okay.
Well, I feel like having you guys back is something I've been wanting to do forever because there's like so much we didn't get to the first time around. But when did you guys first meet each other?
Oh shit. Leg just popped out of my couch. Did you see that?
No.
Too bad. For slapstick purposes, you might want to keep that, but it's disruptive, so whatever. I literally just dropped to the left like 2 inches. When did Andy and I meet? I think we met on the internet. Like actually met? Is that true?
Probably. I don't know. I think like I have a recollection of us It's funny. I was having this conversation with someone last night where they were someone asked like how I met someone, and my answer was like, I don't know, just kind of like around, like I met the person in question just around like the scene, which I don't know if that's like a quaint idea. I don't know if people still do that now, but I remember being aware of Dan. I knew about his bands and stuff beforehand, but I noticed him digging through the same like distro boxes in the backs of shows and stuff. And as a young punk, that was impressive to me because I was like, oh yeah, like that that means he's cool. He's not just a guy from like a popular band. Like he's also digging through like the Andrew Martini 7-inch box at the back of Stalag 13 or whatever. And like picking out the same Havoc Records 7 inches that I am.
Yeah, I was
Um,
like looking for a Code 13 record.
right. And but yeah, I think so I saw Dan around a lot at shows and that kind of thing. I was playing shows and booking shows, but um, I don't think we met until I sent you that email when I
Faithful.
heard that, yeah, fateful email, when I heard that someone had told me that Dan Yemin was starting a thrash band. Like that was like, I remember that's the thing that someone told me. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like the guy from Lifetime wants to do like a super fast band. And I think I saw a flyer at Rock and Roll Plus on South Street.
Definitely made a
Like
flyer.
yeah. But I remember on the flyer it said no one like those under 30 need not apply or something like that.
So whack.
And which, I mean, the ageism is disgusting. But but anyway, at the time I think I was 20. And so or maybe 21 and so I sent him an email just saying like, "Hey, it's Andy from AAJ. I know you've seen my band. I'm down to talk about this, but I am only this old. What do you think?"
You ageist.
Well, here's the
You piece of shit.
I'm not going to defend that except to maybe contextualize it in that like Wags and I had kind of had our share of, and actually this turned out this is not really accurate or true, but feeling like younger people were harder to read in terms of like, yeah, I'm all in, I'm doing it, I'm all in, I quit. Like, and we were trying to like escape flakiness, but um I've subsequently learned that age and there's no correlation between youth and flakiness, because Lord knows plenty of people of my generation and Andy's generation have flaked hard. Um,
I'm proof of that. So yeah, I definitely.
um, but the sort of fateful thing is I had only heard of Affirmative Action Jackson like a week earlier because I saw them at the Kill Time and I was like floored. I mean, I was like out of my mind, floored. I didn't know who they were. They were opening for, who were you opening for? Do you remember?
I don't know. We played the Kill Time a lot. I think that it might have been one of those AN shows
Could
or
have
like
been
Converge or something. It was like something like
like AN with Brandon on drums or something like that. Is that pop? Does that track time wise?
I don't. I think it was probably post Brandon, but
Oh,
I'm not sure.
well, I'd seen this band and like to me, my translation is that they were like a homegrown like version of Spaz, like, and the intensity was like out of control. Like they're so fast and so relentless and so heavy. Jeff, the drummer, was vomiting in a bucket between songs because they just didn't stop. They just played so fast and they didn't stop. And somehow took little breaks to be really, really funny. Um, and I'd seen this like just like a week before, and I was still on the high of like talking to people like, "Yo, this band I saw is ridiculous." And then Andy emails me, and I was like, age, age ain't nothing but a number.
Yeah, it's funny because West Coast Andy stage vibe is so different than East Coast Andy stage vibe.
Oh, true. Say
Yeah,
more.
you're like cutting. You're like a little more like animated on the East Coast, whereas on the West Coast, it's like the cool, stoic kind of vibe.
Contain multitudes, Damian.
I know. I've seen it. I've seen all your different projects and existing simultaneously. It's not like, there's definitely a thing in hardcore where like people kind of like do different things at different times, but you're doing it all simultaneously.
Well, I'm a real person, I'm not a
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
I'm a, yeah.
I only got one thing. I don't have any levels. It's just like one. I can only pull off one version of this shit, and that's it. Uh, but it's funny. I also wonder if you would have to have that like only over 30 thing just to avoid dealing with punishers, Dan, especially at that point. Like, because to me, obviously, I was a fan of Lifetime, but the awareness of, oh my God, Dan's doing a new band and they're looking for a singer, and there's this tape going around of instrumentals and people can try out. And like all these kids, like Arthur, sort of the Sown style, like trying to like be the vocalist for the next project that you're doing. You probably would have had to deal with like a lot of punishing kids putting up a random flyer in a record store to start a band with.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if yeah, I don't know, maybe.
I,
Um,
I was going to try out to be the singer, and I would have punished the shit out of you, dude.
you should come down.
For Kid Dynamite,
Yeah,
you heard of that?
yeah, oh yeah. There was like a thing in Toronto to like people were talking about it, and like who people speculating. It's like I heard he heard Russ Rankin say. Actually, is this true that you heard Russ? You wanted a singer who sounded like Russ Rankin from Good Riddance? Was the
No,
rumor I heard?
I wouldn't say that's true.
Okay,
Um, no, it wasn't my reference point.
okay. What was your goal? What were you looking for? Like, obviously, it worked out. Like everything kind of clicked for Kid Dynamite.
I mean, I was looking for Jason.
Mhm.
Someone could go from like full on screaming to like melodic singing.
There was like a lot of hype around it. Like, and it's like obviously a small scene back then,
Hmm.
but like we talked about last time you were on the show, Lifetime kind of exploded in hardcore as a zeitgeist band after you guys had broken up. Like New Jersey's Best Dancers became like the record of the year. The next year, it felt like.
Yeah, it's not lost on me. That was a lot of what was fueling the intensity of getting Kid Dynamite off the ground. It was like felt uh, unfairly interrupted.
Were you aware of that when it was going on the search, Andy?
For Kid Dynamite? No,
Yeah.
I mean, I was a Lifetime fan. Lifetime's like sort of crest of activity and popularity sort of coincided with my beginning to go to sort of local shows. So I was a big fan. I mean, those records obviously were really great. And I remember when I was in, I don't know, Dan, I feel like it's mad when I bring up stuff like this, but I feel like I was in like ninth grade hearing about Lifetime breaking up, and it was like, whoa, already? Like, I just got that record. Um, I wasn't aware of like this. I wasn't in the scene enough yet at that point to know about Kid Dynamite searching for a singer or anything, but I think I was at the first show. Was it at the
Um,
Y?
YMCA, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um
Judas Factor and Better Than a Thousand.
yeah, I was at that, and I remember buying the tape at the aforementioned Rock and Roll Plus on South Street from the consignment bin, I think. And I remember clocking that it was recorded in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, and thinking that was very cool and late. And I think at that point I was aware enough to connect that that was also where Ink and Dagger recorded, and I was like, "Whoa, Ardmore is the greatest city in the world."
Well,
Pennsylvania
you
undefeated.
know who engineered it?
Terry, right?
Sure, yeah,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
Ink Dagger. So
yeah. I told Yeems a couple weeks ago that I'm really sad that I never got to record anything at that like Philadelphia International Studio on Broad Street. But I'm equally sad that I didn't ever get to record at the Chill Factor in Ardmore, because I mean, doesn't get more legendary than that to me.
You're talking about Sigma, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm in the middle of, I don't know if we're allowed to mention other podcasts. Is that off? Is that okay?
No, you're allowed to.
The only podcast I listen to really, aside from this,
Unless you're going to say that.
no, the only podcast I listen to aside from this one really is What Had Happened Was. And this season it's like 10 episodes of Questlove, and they're talking about getting kicked out of Sigma Sound because Malik B beat up a engineer.
There's like the hardcore connection with them, right? The Roots.
I don't know.
Wasn't there someone?
I mean, Chuck Treese is connected, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Chuck Treese. But like, wasn't there someone else that was in Kill the Man Who Questions that did something with them? Like played
Roots?
Yeah, like I might be totally making this up. I know they've got that hardcore song on the one record.
Right. I never heard of, I don't think there's any Kill the Man connection.
Not Kill the Man, I don't think. But
I'm gonna have to check this out. I know Chuck Treese because he is the most interesting discography in music history. It's Billy Joel to Vegan Right Connections. Like that is a
Yeah.
at first I thought it was the Voice Box 7-inch, like when you said
yes.
I remember the second Painted Black show was with McRad, and I think
yes.
we were all like real stoked on opening for McRad at Temple University.
I think that history of Philadelphia hardcore is like sadly under celebrated. You know, from Sadistic Exploits and obviously Why Die and
Ruin,
Little Gentleman, Ruin. Yeah, Ruin. Ruin seems like there's also like this interesting theatricality to Philadelphia punk and hardcore going back to Ruin, and Serial Killers as well. John Worster talks about it when he's on the show, but Paul Bearer from Serial Killers is the only other person to ever front the Bad Seeds.
Oh, wow.
And he came out and did Jack the Ripper with them in Philadelphia, like at Lollapalooza or something.
I didn't know that. That's wild.
There's like this weird like Rambo as well. There's this like sort of Ink and Dagger, you know, performance kind of theatricality to some Philadelphia hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, remember when I did that show for you guys and Why Die opened, and everyone was like, I feel like it was split down the middle of the audience of when Jackal came out with the Freddy Krueger Club.
The Freddy Krueger Club, exactly.
And like half of the audience was like, "What the hell is this?" And the other half was just like, "This is amazing."
It's interesting because obviously it's a very hard city, and it's a tough town.
Yeah,
but there's also this mummers thing too of being silly and dressing a little bit theatrically, and which is you see it in LA punk too, where you hear stories about Dickie's shows being like the most violent shows imaginable, right? Or kids getting stabbed at Manic Hispanic shows.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I always just chalk that up to Philly just being like a town full of complete lunatics and insane people.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. I don't think there's more to it than that. I think it's just there's not the same inhibitions and concern over like what will people think. It's just the insanity overtakes all of that.
Yeah. Not that you guys were insane at all, but I think like the response in hardcore that I talked about last time was nuts to Lifetime, and the way it, like, I was thinking about how many bands up here came out of Lifetime, or you think about like, you know, Newfound Glory or like Fallout Boy or all these bands that were like hardcore kids, and then that Lifetime record came out and almost gave permission to kids to like make melodic punk music.
Yeah, it certainly gave people permission to be like, to perform their heartbreak in art, and their like forlornness, I think. I mean,
you're right.
Except for Save the Day, I don't really hear Lifetime in any of those bands that we supposedly influenced, but Um, but like in terms of mood, tone, like lyrical content, I think it gave permission for something that hadn't, that you couldn't do before that because you had to be hard.
And even like when you were emotive before, you had to do it like you had to scream, and like it had to be like almost like a Rites of Spring smashing all the instruments version of that versus like trying to be a melodic, or not trying to be, but being a melodic version of emoting.
Yeah.
Like
In retrospect, maybe we should have just stopped at Rites of Spring, but you can't undo what's been done.
I was gonna say, I feel I always like being in conversations like this because Dan can't be an outside, observant of what was happening at the time, nor would he ever be honest about some of this stuff. Um, but just as a record buyer and music listener at the time, I was sort of like back then, all I wanted to hear was fast stuff. Like I was just into like really, fast music. And the one thing I feel like never really gets discussed about Lifetime, and particularly Hello Bastards, was how fucking fast and short the record was.
Mhm.
I was like really, really blown away. Like when I got that record, it just like how intense the music on it was. And none of those bands really seemed to understand that really crucial element of it. Um,
Yeah, that's why I'd say I think I don't hear it. It's not false humility. It's like like Lifetime was first and foremost a fast hardcore band to me. And I mean, we were like, I knew we were different because, like, I don't know, I was a lot of people hated us. So, um, but like primarily we were like a fast hardcore band.
Yeah, and I think also all those other bands that I think that world of I mean Lifetime did present a certain kind of blueprint for a way to perform a kind of mimesis, I think, but none of them once you get one Xerox away from the original artifact, you're doing a performance of a performance and it loses like all of the like Lifetime were fucking cool, That's another thing that I think and they had a certain kind of attitude and sense of humor and all that kind of stuff. They were snotty, they were like a punk band in a way that I think that the people that learned maybe the wrong lessons from that supposed framework, they kind of missed, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, like Lifetime was a punk band, and I think that's
Yeah.
the it's like in the same way Operation Ivy's like a punk band, and like Cap and Jazz is like a punk band, and then the stuff that spawns out of these bands, like you're saying, Andy, it's like one degree removed from the original, and then becomes just a reaction to and a reflection of the thing that it's influenced by, rather than like a new mutation of the punk zeitgeist.
Yeah, it was really I mean, at least again for me, it was really it felt really like contextual too. Like it was really clear that they were part of a particular world of bands, and existed in sort of like a community. And as I've gotten older, I've become really attuned to how appealing that was to me as a young person. Like the various context you would pick up from like reading fanzines and looking at ads and buying records and that kind of thing, rather than rather than things that are just sort of presented as like products that you can purchase that exist in some sort of like silo. Like it was really clear at Lifetime we're like members of, even just going to see them like open for a bigger band at the Trocadero and saying, "Hey, we're playing a basement show next week," from the stage. Like that was really like instructive to like a young person to be like, "Hey, our thing exists in this like particular context," and trying to like make that clear, if that makes sense.
Were you like an Epitaph kid, Andy?
No,
Yeah, that's what I thought. We've talked about that before.
no,
Because like
not at all.
Dan, I know you like No Effects, right? Because I remember you and me singing side by side Punk and Drublick at South by Southwest all those years ago.
I do like no effects, but I'm definitely that's an anomalous interest for me in the epiphat world. Like um NoFX writes good songs and they're fast as fuck, and they downpick really fast. And Mike can write some hooks, but I don't that world you most of that world is not uh as compelling to me as they are. At one point, this is hyperbole, like most of this garbage that comes out of my mouth, but I think I said like the only thing I like on Epitaph is Instead's What We Believe. Uh, and the joke's on me because now like Epitaph owns like most of my catalog.
Yeah, same. No, not most, but they don't. That
Um,
worked out funny. As a young
it,
kid, I would have been so stoked. If you had told me at the AFI riot that one day I was going to be an Epitaph recording artist, even if
mhm.
it was through a weird contractual backdoor that I had no say in.
Even though consent was not involved in the least.
In the slightest.
I do like what else? I do like the Bad Religion album Suffer, but I think it's the only Bad Religion record ever.
Yeah. I obviously that was my introduction of the music in a lot of ways, but now looking at it, I realized that it was kind of a little bit of like the hair metal of the era in a lot of ways. And I can see like geographically, depending on where you were, sometimes it would be like the worst kids that would be into that kind of music. And I remember actually being in line for that infamous AFI riot show.
Oh yeah.
And with these kids, and we're in line, we're talking about music. They're slightly older than my brother and I. And then we end up standing beside them, and they're like making fun of Mark Pesci, who was on stage taking photos of you guys and Weston, because being more of a hardcore kid, we're just saying the most heinous shit to this kid and like yelling. And I'm like, I don't think these kids are like us. Like these are like this weird jock snowboarder side of punk, which I can see it would rub people the wrong way a lot of
Yeah,
times.
we didn't really have that community in Philly. Community is not the right word, but I wasn't aware of that demographic in the Philadelphia scene or really in the New Jersey scene. Um, but I might have been missing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, were there any band? I guess New Jersey, there's a lot of stuff later on. I guess you influence a lot of bands that come out of that scene later on too, in a way. But I can't really, can you think of any Andy 90s Epiphat New Jersey bands?
Bigwig.
Oh,
I,
Bigwig.
oh yeah.
That's
Uh,
the, that's the only thing I can come up with.
Yeah, you're right. They would be part of that.
yeah. I don't really know. I mean, I was very like not that was not my world at the time at all. So I
Yeah,
couldn't speak to it. And by the time I became aware of it, I know it was being marketed to a certain demographic as punk, but it just really I didn't recognize it as punk at all.
Skating kind of got rolled into all that in some like when I was a kid, like skaters, you were listening to like the Bad Brains tape, like if you were skating, like the Regulator was playing in the background or something like that, or Minor Threat. Um, but somewhere along the line, I think skating rolled a little bit more into that surf jock kind of thing.
yeah, like I think someone on the podcast, maybe it was a guy from Shushu, was like, "Oh, it was sportswear punk to me." Like these
Mm.
guys were like, that's what it was because it was all these sort of sports brands at the time or skateboarding brands that were really, that was associated with that music to them. It's interesting too because I find like that's the thing is like to you talk to any of those guys, it's like this is their definition of punk, and it's association with skateboarding. Because that time when I think about skateboarding, it was also like Dinosaur Jr. or the Meat Puppets or like weird SST stuff that was on like a skateboarding tape. But then it became, I guess it just perfectly timed in with the Warp Tour and the disappearance of that kind of all cruise record scene that existed slightly before it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like for sure my experience of that kind of like, I don't know, like spiky gelled up haircut, board short, quote unquote punk stuff that I think you're probably referring to was like totally for like jocks and popular kids. And I feel like that was like very much like um maybe like because of Blink 182 or something like that, which again, like even at the time to me seemed like homophobic, misogynist bullshit. And because I had approached punk via like Nirvana and like stuff like Sonic Youth and Black Flag and Beat Happening and yeah, like the Meat Puppets and stuff like that. So the idea that something would be like homophobic and punk was just totally like insane to me. You know, I was just like, it was really, I mean, I just didn't really regard it with any degree of seriousness at all. But I never connected with any of that shit for a reason. And yeah, like the only kind of like stuff from the Fat and Epitaph world that I really liked was like Propagandhi, who were, you know, vocally, you know, against all of that kind of shit.
Yeah, no, definitely Propagandhi is the band that I think, even if you don't like that world, you gotta like.
Yeah.
When
Yeah, and I mean like Less Talk doesn't sound anything like those, you know, the really great Propagandhi records from that time don't have anything in common, even like sonically um with like I don't know. I don't even know what bands, but you know the ones I'm talking about. The really slick ones from wherever.
it's it's interesting how that sound though does spread around the world. Like I find it fascinating in general how these certain sounds spread around, and eventually we're talking about through the internet and MySpace and all these sorts of things, these influences. But prior to that, like the way Youth Crew becomes, it goes from this sort of like local phenomena to this sort of American wide phenomena to this international phenomena to something that still survives to this day. Or the Epitaph sound. Like when that sound hits Sweden, it changes the course of Swedish underground music and provides like this huge, giant, arguably biggest branch of it. But it's all bands that are kind of like, they don't say necessarily they're influenced by No Effects so much as Bad Religion, but it's certainly that Bad Religion meets RKL sound that No Effects 100% to me defines. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, like again, like at the time, I mean, MySpace and stuff came a lot later, I think, than what we're all talking about. But like at the time that I was getting into stuff, and when Dan was going from Lifetime into Kid Dynamite and then into Pib, like I don't think that like anyone in the Philadelphia scene was fucking with any of that. Like the scene that we were members of, like weren't we like no one I knew listened to any of that kind of stuff. We were very much, you know,
no, I don't mean just that stuff, but I mean
Yeah.
like the fact that like you were doing Power Violence as this kid on the East Coast that has no connection to West Coast graffiti culture necessarily, right?
Well, that's
Like,
not really true though, because I was friends with graffiti kids in Philly who
but was
were
that where you were getting into spaz from, or is it through like punk channels?
well.
Like, I'm just saying it's
I
like a
mean,
completely different experience on the West Coast for this
well,
sound than it
kind
is on the East Coast.
sort of, but remember, I mean, the thing, like, I got into a lot of stuff through buying records and distros and stuff, and at the time, like, I bought, you know, like the Vacuum Records mailer was my fucking Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and that was Power Violence, like international hardcore, like turntablist rap music, graffiti shit. Like that's what that whole world was. So it
Uh-huh.
actually wasn't that different. It was like, you know, people in the Bay who were into, you know, all kinds of cool underground shit, whether it was like, you know, rap music or graffiti or hardcore or whatever. It was all sort of the same world. I mean, that's what all that West Bay shit is. Like that's like, you know, the world all that stuff came from was that stuff. And a lot of my friends, especially ones that went from being like skaters in middle school to like graffiti people in high school, that's, you know, everyone was listening to that stuff. They're listening to like we were all listening to Aphex Twin and like I don't know, like Invisible Scratch Pickles mix CDs alongside Man is the Bastard and Gauze.
Yeah, like, and I think there's definitely like, how does that stuff get spread? There's also like Vice magazine around that time while you were sleeping. There's like a lot of sort of like ego trip and like these sort of cultural
Yeah.
crossover points that were happening around then too. But I mean more like the sonic sounds becoming getting spread and why these certain sounds become picked up upon more than others? Like, why was it power violence that became such a thing on the East Coast for kids all over the place, like in every city, versus like more that California ebullition ex ignata sound? Like, I don't know, I just find it or like, why was it No Effects and this type of punk that hit in Sweden so hard, or hit in Japan with High Standard so hard, or or Lifetime? Why was it Lifetime that changed things, or Refused? Why did Refused record? That's, I'm just always interested by that, like why certain things hit in such a hard way versus other things around it at the time. Other than the fact that it's arguably better musically, because that could also be said about a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah, but it's interesting to think about what made a specific region or community ripe to be influenced by a certain thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it's spreading organically in a way that I don't think. And yeah, definitely stuff can still spread organically today, but I think it's like a lot harder, and there's also a lot easier because the means of communicating are a lot more at hand versus what certainly in the early days of punk was around.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, speaking just personally as someone whose first band was like a fast hardcore band that was, definitely looked to West Coast stuff for inspiration. I was just a teenager who loved playing fast and hard. And that, it wasn't really much more complicated than that. There was certain stuff going on at the time, and that's like what my sonic roadmap was. But at the same time, a lot of that stuff was super serious, but a lot of it wasn't. And it just seemed like the kind of thing that you could do with your friends in your parents' basement after school to try and make each other laugh. And like, I mean, that's like sort of the nature of like hanging out with your friends and being in a band, at least, when you're first figuring it out. So I think that, I mean, for me, that was the appeal. And I didn't really think about it any sort of like, I had no careerist goals in mind. It was just like, what if we had a cool blast beat part with like a heavy part after it?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think
lyrics about how our friends are stupid or whatever.
it was interesting because there's like no machine that's driving these bands to get popular, or for this sound to kind of catch on in all these different places. Like there's Max Rock and Roll, but Max Rock and Roll was like not writing about New Jersey's best dancers, right? Like it was.
Did they? Did MRR review Lifetime?
Yeah, yeah.
Hello Bastard, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, we
Oh,
always we were actually treated really well by Maximum Rock and Roll. Which is, and I think somewhere in between Jersey's Best Hello Bastards and Jersey's Best Dancers, they ran a pretty extensive like interview article. Um, they were always good to us, and I was always like kind of crossing my fingers when the reviews would show up.
Yeah, we got hit by that sword eventually.
Painted Black has only gotten like bad reviews of Maximum Rock and Roll, except one of the records that Ken from Prank reviewed and gave it like the greatest review I've ever probably gotten, maybe for anything I've ever done. And that was like a really
Man, I was really blown away by that.
Yeah,
that's a good one to get from too.
Well, yeah, because again, like another roadmap at the time was like Prank Records for me. Like that was absolutely massive in my development as like a young punker. And so to get sort of like praise from Caesar was really exciting. And he also sort of picked, it was the record that we had the octopus from that hip hop group Dialect co-produce, and Ken was like really positive about like those sort of more like experimental elements of the record, which I think, yeah, that was just like really, really cool.
Yeah. That was a after that I was kind of like, we could retire.
Yeah. I don't really read reviews or comment. Like I don't care about any of that stuff, but getting praise from Ken was really special to me.
Well, and that the impact of that magazine is just I think it's appreciated because we're all disciples of it in a way. Like the
Totally.
Maximum Rock and Roll influence is just so deep on punk culture, hardcore culture specifically.
Yeah.
Um, but I also find it interesting, like, you talk to someone like Walter Schreifels about it, and he fucking hates it. And there's just like a geographical thing that I think also happens depending on where you were, and I guess depending on what your scene's interaction was with Maximum Rock and Roll will be your kind of like takeaway with it. Like being a kid that like loved hardcore and loved this kind of music, it just ended up steering my taste in a lot of ways. And it covered like so much different shit. Like you're reading about like the Candy Snatchers in the same issue that you're reading about, Lifetime. I don't think that's actually the case, but
No, but could be.
Probably. I think
well, both were, but I mean, both were in
Yeah.
there at different times. But
yeah, I mean, it was like it shaped my taste and led my like access to things for years. And like it's wild to think now because now I have like so little patience for anything. But I would read it, no joke, cover to cover, including the classified ads.
oh yeah,
Um,
definitely read the classified.
from letters to the editor to the classified ads, front to back. I would walk 2 miles to get a copy of it. Like it, and I mean, even when they started aggressively limiting what they would cover, it was like helped shape a lot of things in terms of what it led me toward and what it led me away from too.
Mm-hmm.
And if it weren't for that, like that's how kind of Punk Planet famously came about, right? Is like they stepped up to when Tim decided they weren't going to cover anything that wasn't like within these certain parameters of what they defined as punk and hardcore. Punk and Planet, which was then became hugely influential, sort of stepped into the gap and created this, I think, pretty amazing magazine in its own right.
Yeah, which also influenced like a whole different type of punk
Yeah.
that still I think exists.
And it was in this way that you didn't have to be like team this or team that. Like I was reading Maximum and Punk Planet both and taking my cues and finding bands from what they were covering and reviewing. I had in each magazine, I had my reviewers I trusted, my reviewers I hated.
Yeah.
Like if there were always people, if they gave it a bad review, I would check it out.
Bruce Roars, anytime Bruce Roars liked something, I was like, oh my God, I got to check this out. And
yeah.
probably some sketchy stuff out of that too.
He was the guy who really covered Oi stuff, right?
He loved Oi, loved Confederacy of Scum, anti-scene stuff. And was the first guy that actually liked Fucked Up, said gave us really good reviews in there too, eventually, which, like you were saying, getting a review from someone you respected in there that was positive, was like the highest. Like you could retire there. Like this is our Lester Bangs.
No doubt.
And then
I think the thing I was gonna say about MRR that is funny though, talking about Walter. I mean, I don't know Walter well enough to know what his actual opinion on it is, but
we talked about it on the last appearance he has on the podcast with Simon Doom.
Yeah, I regardless of if people liked it or hated it, like everyone did have an opinion, which means that everyone did care ultimately on some level, And yeah, I mean, it's not for me to judge like if it's good or bad that things sprung out of certain criteria that places like Gilman or Epicenter or MRR, certain policies that they evolved over time or whatever. But I do think that, if people's tastes or ideals if you can't stand up to like outside scrutiny, then I don't know what good they really are. And it was, following along like the drama in Maximum Rock and Roll, like letter section with like the columns the next month, and then letters the month after that, and then all these other things. Like, again, that was like really like crucial in my development as a thinker in the punk scene, and it didn't mean that I believed or took a side on any of the stuff that I read, but it did, it makes you a better like critical thinker, I think, going, into the world, both as like someone that does bands, but also participates in like other elements of making punk happen.
Oh yeah, and it completely informs this podcast, like the way they covered punk, and even by what they didn't cover, and by what they said this isn't punk, made me kind of want to look into that and be like, well, why isn't this punk? And like, why is this thing intrinsically better because it's on an independent label versus this thing where the person is signed to a major label and seems to have a better relationship and doesn't seem to be being ripped off in this situation? Like, not saying necessarily the major label's good, but just it made me want to investigate all this stuff. And I think it showed that this music and this genre is international and it's going to be different everywhere.
Yeah, that was one of the most exciting things to me about it early on was like learning about bands from Germany or Japan or England or South America or whatever, that hopefully if you worked hard enough, you could find the recordings of, or, you know, whatever. But when I started getting into booking shows, that was like thrilling to be able to do a show in a basement in Philadelphia for a band from Japan or from Eastern Europe or something like that. That was really crazy to me at the time.
Well, especially because there's like very little uh incentive to do this kind of work. Like there's not
Yeah,
like
there was none at the time. No, not
yeah,
really. Aside from it being cool, like,
yeah.
and you know, being stoked on it.
But now there's like a social capital in being cool. And I don't mean this to insult anyone that does shows, because like obviously it's an important thing, but there's also a lot of scrutiny because of this. But there's also like doing this show is a visible art now in a way that I don't think it was necessarily appreciated or visible unless the show screwed up and then people would go after the promoter. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part back then, you did it just because you wanted to see this show happen. And I'm sure that happens on some level today, but like, I don't know. I'm just shocked at how much work people went to make this thing a viable thing back then, just because we believed in it like a religion.
Well, it was really fun.
Yeah, it was really fun too.
At least for me, it was like the most exciting thing in the world.
Sometimes it felt more like an albatross though than a fun thing. Like some of those shows
How do
you
you
go
mean?
to, well, like sometimes you go to this show and no one would like necessarily like the bands because, like you were saying earlier, I was into fast hardcore, and it was at a time when that was not necessarily what was being on offer at a lot of times, and you'd be there all day at an all day fest at a tiny place with no proper ventilation, and I'd have no money, so I'm eating stale bagels from like the grocery store that I was like in Columbus, Ohio, stuck at, and it was just was like, is this fun? Like hardcore seems a lot more fun now to be a young person at than it did back then. It felt
I
like
think no, what it did,
penance.
no, you are mistaking comfort for fun, my friend.
Yeah, you're right. I did get to see some
I
amazing
think
sets
going,
that weekend,
I
but
think riding bikes after Stalag 13 shows to the fountain on the boulevard or on the, what is it, Ben JFK?
What? Oh,
And all the punks like
Logan
going
Square?
swimming in the fountain at Logan Square, like
Yeah,
after a Stalag 13 show where everyone was getting probably diseases and like dumpstering food and stuff. That was fun as shit.
yeah.
It's not
well,
comfortable, but that is like so much more fun than like, I don't know,
this is
spending
because
like
you
$30 ticket fee to go to like a show that's run on time and in a comfortable place,
but
which I
like
way prefer now, obviously. But
this
I
is
mean,
because you're in a Broadway show version of a punk rock scene, as we're talking about with theatricality, because we didn't go swimming in the fountain after a show in Toronto. We all went and sat in Massimo's Pizza, ate pizza in silence, and looked at the records we had bought. I don't know. I don't remember it being nearly as fun as you're making it sound.
You guys were some dour motherfuckers up there.
We are.
it's cold up there.
It's
And they have,
chokehold country up
yeah.
here. Like, look at what we had.
I think like I don't know. I had some of my most fun when I was uncomfortable and hungry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I guess that's I guess I'm doing the opposite of wearing rose-colored glasses right now, looking at the past.
Well, I don't want to like oversell it, but it really was like just tying it into the premise of your fine show here. Like the thing that made me like it took me a while to really want to get into like the DIY scene in Philly. Like I was buying records and listening to all kinds of music and sort of going to concerts or local shows or whatever. But it wasn't until I saw Ink and Dagger play the church in Philly and kind of realizing what, like the kind of power you could harness, but just fully doing it yourself. Um, that I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in. This is the thing that I fucking want to do. Um, it sold me. And I think that that kind of like the sort of like joy and like intense experience you can get from just a bunch of fucking weird kids bringing some PA speakers and lights into a basement somewhere. Um, Nothing can touch that. And so, yeah, there's things about it that are like maybe really uncomfortable, but that's part of what's great about it too. You know, I mean, back when I was like just stamping hands at the church when I was a teenager, um, we had to load the PA in and out of those famous steps every single show. It sucked. Like it was fucking brutal. Um, but I mean, those were I dare you to find a better show in the history of music than, Ink and Dagger at the church or, whatever, insert or Totalitar at the church or whatever.
Yeah. No, it definitely is a great venue. And I think having a stable venue like that was a huge benefit to the city, like the Gilman was to the Bay, or
Totally.
like having these. And I think that's probably the hardest thing now. And the difference between then and now is there was like this sort of availability of space, which does not seem to be nearly as on offer these days. Where
Yeah.
like you could always
Yeah.
find a place to let you do a show, like a venue.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have. I personally go back and forth on it a lot because I really, I really do believe that venues don't matter that much for punk shit. Like that, it just takes a will and hard work and organization. But having like a nice room that feels good to be in is great. Like the church just architecturally feels good to be in, and it sounds good and all that kind of stuff because of how tall the ceiling is and how tall the stage is and how big it is and all that. Um, but I mean, we've been like certainly. I mean, how many decades now have Dan and I been going to shows in Philly? I mean, like I would have said the same thing about that span of probably what 5 years on Lancaster Avenue when, you had Fake House, Stalag, Kill Time, House of Conflict, and there was another one too. There was another place that did shows on that block.
I don't remember the other one, but I mean, all in one block, 1 or 2 block stretch at Lancaster Avenue, which is crazy.
Yeah, it was insane. And I mean, the shows that happened there, like over a summer, would fucking, turn anyone's hair white how sick they were. But, you know, they all closed and then people figured it out, like, and that's okay. Like, and now there's people doing shows all over town and probably ones that I don't even know about. And that's beautiful to me.
I like Stalag, but the church is way nicer.
Sure.
Like there's no one shitting beside the toilet.
But
Maybe that happens sometimes.
But
No.
but also there was this, I mean, but there's this run at Stalag where like for this brief period of time, it felt like there was a show there like every other day. And
Yeah.
there's so much stuff happening there from all these different sub scenes. It's kind of wild. I mean, you're right, the church is nicer and more comfortable, but like you look at like the schedule for Stalag 13 from like its busiest year, and it's just like, what, how?
Yeah, like I skipped the shows that I skipped because I didn't feel like going like 2 days in a row. Oh my God, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, that's that part of the country in the late 90s, mid 90s even, like there's just so much stuff happening in every town, especially in like Pennsylvania.
yeah.
And I say this in like every interview, but it bears saying again is that when I first moved here, like Philly was a town that people often skipped on tour between DC and New York. And it's like really, and I think I have a broad enough historical perspective to say this, like, and not have it be hyperbole. It's, which is rare. Is that because of the DIY punks that Philly became like a place you would never skip on tour.
Mm. Yeah, because you're right. Even most of those like legendary shows were at like in New Jersey. A lot of those early kind of like hardcore shows, like with some of the great Philadelphia bands were, or like I guess Love Hall and stuff, but it just felt like
There were a few, like back way before I moved here, there were a few places that did shows that are thought of as legendary. But if you weren't from Philly, people were like I would go to city shows in city gardens at Trenton, which was definitely a scary place for me for a lot of my youth. And people would tell me there, like, oh, I'm not going to that Philly show. Philly's scary.
yeah.
And I think maybe a lot of that had to do with there was a skinhead scene that was pretty scary. And the places where there were shows were like not neighborhoods you should go by yourself unless you were a local.
Yeah.
But then there was this like, but I don't think there was as much of a consistent place as like a CB's or like a 930 club or something like that.
Nancy Burles talked about it when she was on the show. She's like, yeah, like also Philadelphia's kind of a poor city, and there wasn't a lot of money for a lot of this stuff. There wasn't as much gear around to record. The economics of Philadelphia impacted the scene, she said, right from like kind of the get-go with a lot of these bands. And the fact that there's like, obviously there's that great comp and there's like the few singles that some of these bands got out there, but like a lot of the stuff's under documented in Philadelphia punk and hardcore.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a generation gap, like in the mid to late 80s to like in the early 90s when like Sokol and Cabbage Collective started like actively bringing bands to town. But yeah, because there was all that first wave stuff, Pure Hell and FOD, Dead Milkman, like Why Die, all that stuff. But by like, I feel like by about 85, it had kind of cooled down. Like the Ruin record was like 86, I think, right? Um, and so yeah, there was like this like not long, but like in punk time, like 4 years is a really long time. Um, and my understanding is that like there was all this stuff happening in DC that Brian and Ralph from who went on to do Franklin and stuff were like into, but they just like wouldn't come to town. So they would just like actively bring, I don't know who were some of the first bands that they brought up. Not, I don't
I
think
don't remember.
that was like,
I was less familiar with Brian and Ralph. The Cabbage Collective was like Bull. It was like the policy of three guys
yeah.
who were actually like a South Jersey band that had
Mhm.
just moved to Philly. They were South Jersey like kids that had like been like straight up hardcore kids and were much more into like then became a much more like into like the mid 80s Discord kind of vibe. And they were doing shows at like they were doing shows at like abandoned movie theaters in South Jersey. And then they moved to Philly and just like started renting the Calvary Church and then the Unitarian Church.
Yeah, they credit where it's due. They discovered the first Unitarian church. They were the first ones to do it.
Goes back that far.
Well, it
That
was
was
like probably 91,
90. That was 92, I think.
92, yeah. But I always love looking at it's very 90s because if you look at any of the videos of like shows around then, they no one had figured out that there was a stage in the room yet.
Yeah.
So like there's videos of like I don't know, Sleater Kinney or like whoever, but they're just playing in the middle of the room with all the lights on, like 20 feet away from a perfectly good stage.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Yeah, exactly. That was the era. Like you would refuse to play on the stage. Like,
Yeah, but I don't think it was ideological. I think it was just like, oh, this is where you set up in the middle of the room.
Aztec had it in their contract they wouldn't play on a stage above a certain height, and they were like,
Oh, that's
refused to.
punk for a band with a contract. Get out of here.
Or I don't know, maybe it wasn't on the paperwork itself, but I know they refused to play on the stage at Columbus Fest that year.
I want to
Yeah.
say it started as naivete and then became ideological.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I just thought it was funny. But yeah, I think Brian Sokol and Ralph Darden were sort of simultaneously actively bringing like Discord and Kill Rock Stars and bands like that to Philly because they just weren't coming. And I think that sometimes it's all it takes is like one or two kids who are into something to write some letters. And I can't remember what the first couple shows they did were, but I think it was post like Nation of Ulysses, but it might have been like Jawbox or stuff like that. But yeah, there definitely was like a little gap. But yeah, at the beginning of the 90s, there were like a couple people who are starting to do stuff in Philly. And I think you can connect a lot of that with the stuff that like John Hiltz was doing in the famous Hiltz basement in Westfield, New Jersey. I draw a direct line from that stuff to like the formation of Painted Black and the, like both like aesthetically, but ideologically too. Like, and in a lot of cases, I mean, if we could play the Hiltz basement, which I've been trying to do for the whole time we've been a band, we would. But I mean, we still just, for us, it's still like the church and places like that.
And I guess Robbie Redcheeks was doing shows too, right?
Yep.
That was a little after, but yeah, he was doing more like hardcore stuff. But a lot of it was at the church. Some of it was at the Y that we talked about.
Mid and late 90s, Robbie was really busy doing shows.
Yeah, because that was like who was booking, I guess, No Warning when they were first going down in the Swarm.
Mhm.
The Swarm first went down.
I was there.
You were at that Swarm show
Yeah.
at the Stalag?
It was at the Kill Time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was that one with what was it called? Fuck, there was like a kind of metal core-y type band with a dreadlock woman singer, little white girl with blonde dreadlocks.
I don't know.
And Next to Nothing played too. Or Next Step Up, maybe? Some band on Plus Minus, some weird Plus Minus band. I don't think you were there, Dan, because I think Colleen said you were coming. I was like so stoked. I don't think you came in the end. I don't blame you. It was not.
That show was sick. I don't remember who played. I went to see the Swarm.
Yeah,
but, it was great.
They bullied the shit out of me. It was like so brutal, like so insane in retrospect. It was definitely like a introduction to the world of like hardcore band in a van culture. Just certainly one of the most toxic thing out there.
I think those people in Philly liked the Swarm because they were kind of like funny assholes, right?
Yeah, they were kind of doing that post
our town.
Yeah, they're doing the post Charles Bronson thing.
Mhm.
And it was also like that was a thing in the 90s, right? Like in hardcore, even like to be an asshole, like Answer Me and just felt like Forced Exposure, that kind of vibe.
Born Against and Dear Jesus and like
nasty, being a little bit nasty was like in vogue.
Yeah,
and that certainly rubbed off on the Swarm and all of Toronto by extension.
Antagonizing your audience, that was a big thing.
Yeah, like I interviewed Matt the other day for Piss Jeans, and it made me realize like just Toronto, how mean of a scene it was, and how we just thought everyone was mean in every scene like that. Like everyone's got to be an asshole like we are here, but it's like no, it was kind of like Toronto was a particularly mean punk rock and hardcore scene back then.
I didn't know that.
Philly was like that too, though. Maybe that's why we all got along.
Yeah.
I mean, the Philly people were fucking so mean.
Real hater cultures.
Yeah.
Philly definitely had a chip on its shoulder in the 90s pretty intensely.
Yeah, I definitely have some wild Philadelphia memories from shows, and it's like it's a tough town. There's a lot of tough bands from Philadelphia. Why Guy's got Freddy Krueger gloves on? Those blades were probably sharp on his too. That was the other thing. People were laughing about it. They probably didn't realize that, Jackal's out back sharpening them with a fucking.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me if he just brought a machete or something.
Yeah. That live show that we did that night is one of my favorite backstage hangs ever. With
That was an interesting one.
Who was it? I can't remember. I know Jackal was there.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Jay from Eat the Turnbuckle and Bad Luck.
Yeah.
And
That was nice.
Philly Boy Roy was on the phone.
Oh yeah.
And it was Jeff Cannonball was there as well. Was now a baby. Congratulations, Jeff.
Shout out, another breeder. Wow, cool.
Yeah. It was a fun night that night. I definitely the Turn Out of Punk live tour. Some really good memories on it. Chris O'Toole and I reflect on it very positively.
Yeah, it was fun.
Feels like it was before the world broke me, in a way that I think we all got broken a little bit in the last few years.
Yeah, no doubt.
And we're all so naive when I go back and listen to it. It was but that's the
was that your experience? Like, what, Damian, when you started coming to Philly, like what did you make of the city?
First time we were there was that show. Someone broke into the van, if I'm not mistaken, or there was some drama involving the van.
Well, that's a rite of passage here. Definitely.
Yeah, that was the thing. And we stayed at Castle Grayskull House.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is a tough town. I was super excited about being there though. I wasn't vegan at that point, unlike everyone else on the tour, which added to the bullying. So I had a cheesesteak and it was delicious.
Yeah, you left the vegan straight edge show to go get a cheesesteak?
Yeah, well, I also got made fun of mercilessly because I went to buy a bag of deep fried dough and they were like, no wonder I had a bag of deep fried dough and Coke. And it's like, no wonder you're fat. No wonder you're fat. And I'm looking at Christian, who's just as heavy as I am. And I'm like, well, what's your excuse then? You're not eating any of this stuff. And then we went to, we hung out.
Did they take you to dumpster at the Adwala factory?
No, we didn't do that, but we did hang out with Scott Bybin.
Another rite of passage.
Let's just stop with that.
For better or worse.
We went for Ethiopian food.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really good time in Philadelphia. I thought it was like a cool city. It definitely felt like a place where there was a really strong DIY hardcore scene. And I think that was the other cool thing about
you were here a lot. Before I knew where you were from, I thought because I feel like I saw you and Lauren constantly down here in the early aughts. And I didn't know you were from Toronto because I saw you so often.
Once Fucked Up started touring, we were down there quite a bit because Andy did first show we played was at Clifton Hills.
Clifton Heights.
Sorry, Clifton Heights.
Elko.
Clifton Hills is the part of Niagara Falls that has amusement park stuff on it. So
it was not there.
I could see how you got confused.
Yeah. It was like an amusement ride in my imagination. And so we kind of were coming down to Philadelphia ever since. But yeah, we would play and we'd always play like 2 shows. Play like a church show after a while. Like first time we got approached by Jade Tree was at a church show with Hardskin. Do you guys play too, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hardskin, us, you guys, and D4.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah.
That's a great show. Holy shit. That was
a great show.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like the Sailor Jerry thing. So Justin would hook us up with clothes and we get to go down there too. And yeah, a lot of good memories. I actually really like, and I always get good records when I'm in Philadelphia. I brought Holden there on our last show that we played. Was on the road with us. So, had him there, got to show him the city. He ate 2 cheesesteaks because he is not vegan.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We went through some cheesesteak experimentations on which was the best. Took him on the wrong way on the elevated train for 2 hours and
oh yeah.
so pissed. He was so pissed about
Yeah,
that.
I'm always just, I feel like you dipped into Philly at a really good time. Like that was
Yeah.
like I mean, I guess it's like anyone who was like 16 when that stuff was happening would think that like I was, but I do think that that was like a really exciting time for like DIY punk in Philadelphia. There were like some really great people and really cool and exciting things happening. A lot of which I actually think, so I was kind of thinking about it yesterday because I knew we were doing this today. A lot of stuff that's totally left out of the history now. Like I can't remember if this is before or after we started recording, but like Kill the Man Who Questions were like a monumental band like for Philadelphia. Um, and like I mean no one really talks about them now for I don't know. I can't say why exactly, but I mean they were spoken of in the same breath as Los Crudos and Drop Dead, and I mean they like went to my high school and and played all the time and all that kind of stuff. There was some really cool and exciting stuff happening back then. I mean Pat from that band also was in a Profane Existence band when he was 15.
Mm.
He was in my grade at high school, and it's like that record's pretty good, I think. I think it probably holds up. But the Manual 7 EP on Profane Existence. Um, but yeah, like there was all kinds of really exciting stuff happening right around then, like from that stuff to Ink and Dagger to it was like the burgeoning of a lot of like dance music stuff in Philly and like experimental shit and all that weird freak folk stuff was about to pop off too.
Mhm.
So like all these people were sort of like all doing this stuff in the exact same spaces at the exact same time. And all of them were like friends with each other and going to each other's shows and parties and that kind of thing. So that was like a really cool time for you to, become aware of it, I think.
Oh yeah, and Diplo and Santi Gold and like that kind of whole thing
Yeah.
also was kind of
Mhm.
popping off around there too.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was all.
Diplo throwing those parties, those Hollertronics parties, like was really, I think, important and formative and crossed over with the DIY scene a lot.
yeah, like it really, and I think Kurt Vile also, like you're saying, the freak folk thing leading to like Kurt Vile kind of coming out of that, and like
Hmm.
War on Drugs, and um, yeah, like it was a really kind of like vibrant DIY scene that leads to a lot of like bigger kind of musical movements kind of coming out of this sort of like ultimately basement show kind of scene. Like you're saying, like it was like a scene that had to kind of be rebuilt after these gap years.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess it happens a lot in punk and hardcore, and that's what leads to sort of like I guess new scenes is kids feeling the need to just rebuild and being like, okay, well, there's nothing here like this. Let's do this thing up. But it was like you know, punk houses and basement shows and obviously these weird venues that existed on the street together and then the church, but it was just kids kind of like piecing it back together again that leads to all this stuff.
Yeah, and I think like, people always talk about like um how Philly has a chip on its shoulder because it's not New York or it's not DC, which is true to a degree. But I also think that it means that when you are doing stuff and making stuff happen, whether it's shows or, a space or a band or a label or whatever, it's not New York. So there's not the same kind of industry in the town, and so it's implied that like you're doing it both because you want to and also sort of free of those sorts of like potentialities in terms of like being able to make money or turn it into something bigger or whatever, which I think is good. Like I think taking that stuff off the table allows people to do things in kind of like a different way that, to me was way more exciting and appealing than, being in a cool band in New York City or LA that gets a deal and gets signed and then, that's your life from then on. Like Philly is still a lot of the same people. I mean, like Chuck Meehan from Why Die is still at every single fucking punk show. It's
Yeah.
like, still now it's like it's all the same people. It is like really at its best, it is really a community of people and not like a scene of consumers or whatever.
Certainly not a place anybody ever moved to get known or make a name for themselves or get a recording contract.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite actually. I think people do now move to Philly because it's a place where you can sort of create freely.
Yeah.
it's also like to go back to that idea of putting on shows not being as much of a kind of like hidden art form. Like during the Clear Channel Wars, Agnew's kind of like rise, certainly in public media too, people talking about, the idea of being able to do big DIY shows. And there's sort of this, even in punk, there's this idea that like at a certain point you'll level out of doing a DIY show. And this sort of idea that a DIY promoter can scale up and do whatever size room. And if a band's willing to still work with the promoter, you could be. And I guess Bright Eyes was part of that narrative at that time too, when he was exploding and you guys doing
Yeah,
shows
he
for him.
famously wouldn't play Clear Channel shows, right?
Yeah, during that era. I don't know if he's still able to do that because I think probably the landscape's changed a little bit too. But,
Changed a lot.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a lead singer though, in the truest sense of the word, where I'm just completely naive to any actual information of what it's like to be in a band, other than the shit involving getting on
Other than
stage and yelling.
skipping load in, you mean?
I definitely have done that a few times. When you got this ego to carry, Dan, you know what it's like. You've been on both sides of the divide, but when you got the ego to carry, it's very hard to carry gear.
Let me assure all your listeners that you do not have to be a lead singer to skip loading.
It helps though. It definitely helps.
Yeah, I think we actually sometimes tend to some sort of weird role reversal in that regard.
But yeah, like it certainly is a different landscape now in a way, but at that time it was like I remember seeing like CNN reporting about it, like it was mainstream news, this idea of like existing outside of Clear Channel for bands. It all seems so quaint now, like existing outside of Spotify, existing outside of like mainstream distribution networks. But
because now I'm pretty sure one company owns all of that and owns probably us as well.
yes, they're definitely paying for this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, for what it's worth, I do, just to connect it again back to the MRR Gilman stuff. Like, no one's stopping any punk bands from divesting themselves from all of these structures.
True.
Is there anyone?
I think that I think that there are probably a lot of people that don't put their stuff up, and it's going to be a material concern soon enough. I mean, I think Spotify is not, didn't they announce that they're not going to pay you if you're like under 1,000 streams or something like that? They're gonna take your money to post your stuff and then not give you anything in return. I mean, at some point, that's just like not a very good deal.
Yeah. No, but maybe it's not Spotify, but like, what I'm saying, there's like, there's definitely like a corporate ownership of distribution means now.
Absolutely.
Outside of,
Yeah, but again, I think that's like a very much a matter of like how you approach things. Bands are more like, bands certainly can operate outside of that stuff, and I think I'm in full favor of it. It's good. I mean, the thing I talk about a lot is that back in the 80s and 90s, there you could go, and even into, I mean, Painted Black's interesting because I think we started, and the first few records we made came out right as this world was kind of dying, but you could inhabit a completely alternative structure for the entirety of your band. You could play only independent venues booked by local independent people. Your music could only be on college radio or independent radio. It could be only on an independent label, only in independent media, whether it was like free weeklies or, whatever, fanzines.
Independent distribution.
Yeah, exactly. Your distributor was independent, like everything was fully independent, and it actually worked out pretty well for people, like you maybe had less quote unquote exposure, like the number next to your name might not be as big or whatever, but it actually kind of worked. And beyond that, there was also sort of like an accountability structure. There was like an enforcement mechanism to keep people, from doing the other thing. And I do wonder if, like, as all of these systems that we have now kind of begin to shatter, which they are, if like younger people or even older people are going to maybe start to rebuild stuff in the way that Philadelphia rebuilt like live music in the late 80s and early 90s. There's just like a need to do it. And certainly I don't think people are going to get less interested in listening to records or going to see bands. So at some point it may be necessary. But unfortunately, some people are going to have to like leave money on the table, or at least the premise of becoming more famous or something. But again, like back when we were first starting our band, we didn't care about any of that stuff, and I think we're still operating in the same way. I think anyway.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part. I mean, we're not really like waiting for somebody to distribute us or somebody to book us or whatever.
No, yeah,
It is interesting though to see the death of like the middle class band, which kind of like emerges post Nirvana, and I think on an independent level post Offspring, where bands could like, and Fugazi I guess exists before this, but like when you talk to bands and it's like, yeah, we're selling through 30,000, 40,000 CDs, and we were
yeah,
getting 50% of that money. So we were making good money, and we're playing these shows, we're getting paid decent money. And when that kind of, and there was an ecosystem back then with these magazines that existed that weren't huge, but they did cover bands like we're talking about, be it Punk Planet or Max Rock and Roll, or be it even like Spin
Flip
magazine.
side. What about
Flip
flip
side,
side?
yeah, exactly. Like there's, and there were these weeklies that would write about shows that were happening and things like that, and it was sustainable to be in these bands, and uh, maybe that's going to be something that's not sustainable anymore. Like maybe like you're saying, like Spotify eventually is going to stop paying anyone but the mega artists, so it's either going to be you're doing it just because you love it, or you're doing it because it's a huge industry, but there's no like kind of like, oh, I'm going to do this and not lose money, or do this and break even, or
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like Dan, I know famously is on record as saying that he likes not having to do punk to support himself, and I'm the same way. Like we don't look at our band as like a means of making a living, so that's helpful, I guess. Um, but also I don't think any of the bands who got us into doing it did either. I mean, I think you're so right, Damian, that the notion of like a middle class like indie whatever band is very like it's very aligned with like the CD format as a consumer good.
Mhm.
And that was like a real limited sort of time in history, and then because it wasn't that way in the 30s, it wasn't that way in, the 60s. It was like there was a really specific time and place where it was possible to sell, tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of records as like a mid-tier, like indie or punk band. Um, but even then, like when it was possible, I never thought of this kind of music or this sort of whatever it is you want to call it as a thing that you should be able to pay your rent doing. And I think it's interesting to me looking back that like a lot of people saw that happen and then were like, oh, I'm entitled to be able to make a living playing hardcore forever, you know?
But the people that were on the next level of this were relying on it to make a living on it, being running distribution companies, running record labels, putting on shows. Like
Mm-hmm.
these people were making a living off it. The people putting out records, right? Like some of these people that put out independent records became millionaires off it. A lot of them made a lot more money than the artists involved, as I'm sure we can all attest
Yeah.
to with some of our projects, some of us more than others on this call, certainly.
Yeah, that's
That,
true.
like there were other people that were making and expecting to make a living off this thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to, and one thing I want to qualify, I do recognize that it's a position of privilege to be able to say, like, I've never had to think about, I feel lucky that I never had to think about making a living off of music. It's like, because I have another gig that, you know, that I worked hard for and that works for me. And I like being able to just do music purely for like artistic motivations. But I'm not like, people got to eat too. And I'm not trying to like throw shade at people that are trying to do that. But I'm really glad I don't have to do it because I don't like the compromises I've seen even the best people be faced with when they're making a living off their music.
Do you think though, if you had to have, or if you did expect that, or if there wasn't this other sort of thing that you worked hard to achieve, but also that you were working towards in your other career, uh, would it made you have like changed the way you looked at Lifetime or decisions that you were made in that band, or maybe later on with Kid Dynamite even?
I don't know. It's hard to say. And part of it is because like the point Andy made about the bands that got us into this not being, at the time, I don't think any of the bands that got me into punk like experienced their bands as like viable long-term careers. I mean, like even bands that became really big in the Lollapalooza, like bands I saw in the 80s that became really big, when I saw them touring and they're playing to like 200 people a night, like I don't think they were all like thinking, they were just holding out for bigger and better things. I think they're just playing music. And
I will say until 90s hardcore, from doing this podcast, the vast majority of them did want that and did
yeah,
hope to achieve that. I'd say Black Flag certainly did. They didn't want to compromise necessarily, and maybe they didn't think there was like pre-Nirvana like a means to achieve this sort of success, but I think they all wanted it. Like to make a living just doing this bullshit. And that's why I asked that, because
I
obviously
don't
as a
know.
guy that chose this path that has fucked me over, certainly financially, of doing this as a career. Um, that's the only reason Fucked Up stay together, is because none of us have another option. I think I really believe that is we're like, fuck, we got to make it work creatively. Like creatively, the project is bigger than any interpersonal relationships, which have long been pushed past the breaking point at different times.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad you shared that because it's thought provoking. I'm just trying to think back on like the records I bought and the shows I went to in the 80s. And I often got the sense that a lot of those bands were not really expecting even to be together very long.
Well, like I think like you look at Sonic Youth, who I know you brought up seeing early on at
Yeah.
those shows, talking to Keith, from the Circle Jerks, who you brought up seeing early on. Then even Walter, from Youth of the Day, even Ray and Porcel and Shelter, kind of like they obviously took different career paths at different times, but they all tried to kind of keep it going at a certain point. Like, and maybe that's the intoxication, because I don't think when I entered this thing, doing this for a living was something I ever wanted or thought would be cool. I like hated procore bands, and the entire rub on that was like disgusting to me. But then it's like, boiled frogs type situation where the heat's turned up slowly, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this water's pretty comfortable. And then you realize it's just cooking you. And you're cooked. You're totally cooked, and you're 40 something years old, and this is the path you chose. So I'm not saying one's better or anything. I'm just fascinated by that decision point. And I think like, things, I don't know why these various projects ended at different times, but like if they had to have worked, you think, would it have been different, or were like these things impasses that,
Who knows?
yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, I have a tendency to come off as judgmental sometimes, as
Cut
Dan
it
will.
out.
Um, I am not sitting in judgment of how anyone chooses to do anything. And I think part of the problem is that like, they're subject to whatever their material circumstances are, obviously, at any time. I'm just saying that I think like to me, a lot of I guess I believe that a better alternative is possible, and to what we're all dealing with now. And I just think that going further into the bad place is not the answer. Like I think that like what Fucked Up have managed to do is really inspiring, and enviable, you know, like being able to expand your world and your universe in the way that you have like over decades is there's no, I mean, there's no band like Fucked Up in the history of music. And being
I
able to do
appreciate that.
that. No, it's true. I mean, you know, we're friends, but like also, you know, I think both Dan and I are huge admirers of you guys. And I think that, you know, like you should be able to do that for your job as artists. Like you should be able to do that. But I don't think like you're not doing off of Spotify royalties and, you know, and whatever clear channel has morphed into today is certainly not doing that. You're doing it off of your own like labor and genius.
We were like you guys, like we got in uh just at the end of this as this thing was dying,
Yeah.
right? Like, and put out records, and the ecosystem that brought us up, and Piss Jeans too. When I was talking to Matt, it's very much the same thing. Just doesn't exist anymore. Like there's no weeklies anymore. There's no Pitchfork anymore. There's still Stereo Gum, and but there's no, and there's still Brooklyn Vegan, but there's certainly no Noisy anymore. There's like none of these things to tell people that we've got a new record out, and because of our name, we can't advertise on social media when we play a show. And because that's the main way people find out about shows, we're constantly getting like, "Oh, you guys just came to town. I had no idea." Which I don't have, but then at the same time, why should I have any expectation of making a living doing this? That wasn't why I chose this path. I didn't like put an effort to become the lead singer of a band because I knew this was going to be what I was going to do. You know, so I shouldn't have any expectation of doing this thing. So I'm not, like, I agree with you. Like, this is
Yeah.
something that you can't be mad at punk for not paying your bills because you shouldn't expect it to.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I was just saying, I think I'm just I just want to be encouraging for people to like build stuff and do things on their own terms beyond anything else.
Yeah, and I definitely have a lot of love and respect for anyone that's doing it right now, because there's like it's easier in a lot of ways, but it's also like so much harder than it was when even we were doing it, which was, you know, post Nirvana, and you're in my case, you know, Dan, you were a
Yeah,
little pre Nirvana with your era, right? So it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
yeah. It's still like it's still actually kind of hard to imagine like thinking about the before and after. Like if you, it's very hard for me to articulate it in a little way. I was talking to one of my kids yesterday about trying to explain to them being around for before phones, before mobile phones, and after, or before internet and after, and like trying to actually articulate what the lived experience is like kind of hard. But yeah, I mean, before Nirvana, I mean, I think bands were maybe like most bands, even like popular underground bands, were like, if I could pay rent at the end of this tour, that would be cool. Let's hope. Um, and I feel like you could kind of feel that desperation also. Um,
Yeah, you're either Butthole Surfers or REM pre Nirvana.
pardon me?
You're either Butthole Surfers or REM pre Nirvana.
Liked both bands.
Yes, exactly. But like, you're either trying to make it scraping by, trying to be, you know, professional musicians, or you're like a traveling freak show,
Yeah.
staying in cities till you get thrown out, passed on to the next city.
Yeah, like I'm not sure whether like 1987 Sonic Youth like expected their music to become something that people would pay for out of a handful of freaks. I mean, maybe they did, but like,
I think they hoped it, you know, like they were they were the ones that signed to the major label, right? Like they were going for
they
it.
helped it happen. I'm just not sure if that was their intention or their idea. They really thought that was a possibility when they were like touring on Evil. Like, I don't know.
Well, I guess like who were the bands that were probably making a living doing, and obviously using the turn out of punk definition of punk, broadly speaking, a living doing punk, pre-Nirvana in this thing. Like it was like probably the Replacements, uh,
Fugazi.
Fugazi, Husker Du,
Whisker Du.
um, Faith No More. You know, like I think they had hits, right? Like they had Epic was a hit pre-Nirvana, right? Wasn't it? Am
I
I
don't
wrong
know.
on that?
I don't really know.
They were on SNL in '88, and so that's pre. When Larry Livermore was on the show, he said that Nirvana didn't mean anything for the, or I don't know. I'm paraphrasing when I say that. So, that Nirvana meant very little to the Bay explosion because Faith No More was kind of their Nirvana because they had kind of blown up first.
Mm.
I guess Rollins band too. Well, Liars a little after, but they were on SNL '88 as well.
In 88?
Yeah,
No.
'88 and Sugar Cubes.
No, Liar wasn't until the 90s.
I know, but they were on SNL weirdly. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what they were on for, but Rollins band was on in like '88.
That's
Really?
why I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Wow. My thing about a lot of this stuff is that I've come to understand a lot of these things, like stuff you talk about, like Nirvana or insert whatever else, um, as like, or like Sonic Youth signing to Geffen or whatever it is. Like, I think conventionally people see that as like the beginning of some kind of boom, but I think it is always more symbolic of the end of something, like the end of a groundswell of like indie, like all the Our Band Could Be Your Life bands, like that was sort of building and building and building this independent movement of, guitar outside music. And it hit a sort of inflection point to where industry is now interested. And then so to all the outside people, they see it as like, oh, Nirvana happened. And then there was this big boom. And then all this stuff, started there. And in certain ways, that is true. Certain things did start. But like, the catalyst is like, 5-10 years of all those SST bands like touring independently and, building, huge fan bases across like, labels, bands, promoters, whatever, to the point at which like a Geffen would become interested. You know what I mean? And then in the wake, lots of people get deals, and then,
They were all going for it, right? Like they all signed to majors. Even pre-Nirvana, they're all talking to majors.
well, yeah, of course. But I just mean that like it wasn't starting there in terms of like how the culture views it, like it was sort of like the end of a bunch of work from all these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like certainly
And
like no Nirvana was standing on the shoulders of giants in that
Mhm.
kind of way, but I think they were all reaching for the same prize. Red Cross as well. Like they're all like kind of going for like, yo, let's get fucking famous. Let's be Devo. Like who doesn't want to be Devo? Like make music on your own terms and get famous for it.
Yeah.
Like uh, Offspring might not be people's favorite band, and I totally understand that. But you're the Offspring. Like you get famous for making your own brand of this music, which is very uncommercial to write down on paper. Like who doesn't want to just have success on your own terms and be able to kind of like live in your own shit and do that sort of thing? And I can see why it's tempting. Believe me, I can see why it's tempting.
No, yeah, that's my point though, is that I get like that's why I wouldn't like necessarily blame any of those bands for making those decisions at the time, because if you're the Meat Puppets and you've been touring for 10 years and making whatever music you want to make, and then all of a sudden someone is like, "Hey, how would you like to make music and have 10 times as many people hear it?" I mean, you can see why people went for that at the time and why they still go for it now. But I mean, we all know where that ends up 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely like, but I think that's also part of it too, right? Like not everyone's gonna be Nirvana, but let's be honest, I'd much prefer to be the Melvins and be the band that influences the Nirvanas, or to be
Mhm.
the band that like maybe never makes it, but the people that know. And that's ultimately what like that's the currency of this thing, is like it's not success financially, certainly.
Yeah. That's never
It's-
been a concern for us at all, you know?
Yeah, but it's
Never.
like recognition from these peers, cultural icons, and de facto religious figures for us, as punk rock is this religion. It's like the good review from the person that you grew up reading sacred texts from in these magazines, or it's like the person you grew up singing the hymns of at these congregational places that were taking place in a literal church in some cases, telling you that they like your band and feeling like you're a peer.
Unitarian church, Damian.
Well, it's a church, but like like that. But that's cool though. Like that's like, I think it adds to this sort of metaphor that I'm going with here. That like that's what we want. Like is that we want to be part of this thing and part of this fabric, and that's.
But isn't what's
goal.
cool about punk that they aren't gods? Like that's what's cool about it, is that they're just
they aren't,
Yeah.
but yes, they fucking are, right? Like as much as like Ian, no, our relationship to Ian MacKaye, the person, has very little to do with Ian MacKaye, the icon that we all have instilled in us from a young age. I mean, people of our generation, like our generations, right? Like, but I mean, like that's like it was like instilled in us that this guy walks on water, is sacrosanct, and can't do anything wrong, and like found the way to do this thing without sin and all this sort of perfect thing. And it's like Ian's a great guy. I'm not, but it's like he's a human being, and the internalized Ian MacKaye is different in the same way that there's like this historical person named Jesus Christ potentially, but there's a historical person, Jesus Christ, and then there's like also this sort of like mythology that people worship around this thing, that not necessarily who this person was beyond a few things.
I guess so. But
Smoking weed. You guys follow me.
I got into punk because I fucking hate religion. So I don't know if I agree.
You're still in the church, dude. You're still in the fucking church.
The irony is that we've had some of our most transcendent experiences inside of a church.
Yeah, and it is a religion, right? Like, and I mean that in the most positive way too, because like, what better religion for us to get into that encourages us to do our own shows and to write our own music and to contribute to this culture because we love it, not because it's going to yield some sort of financial reward. And then maybe it potentially does, or maybe people do like your band, or maybe you like wind up changing the shape of this music for a whole thing. And look how many careers Lifetime gave people. This thing where Dan never wanted to do it full time and make it his career certainly blessed a few people with careers in its wake.
I think that, well, I mean, that is, I guess the only religious connection there is that I would consider that a great sin for Dan.
All right.
But no, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you can, I'm on record as saying this is not a religion, and I fucking hate religion, and I think it's just part of why I like punk is because it's not, because we have like Ken Sanderson and like Martine from Crudos and like people like that, and not fucking Mick Jagger or Jesus Christ. Like I don't give a fuck about those people, you know. I think what's cool about punk is that it is like a community of real people, and not these like religious figures or, you know, rock star icons or whatever. You know what I mean?
Not people whose actual lives are eclipsed by their mythology.
Yeah.
Preach, brothers. Preach.
That's the part that feels essential to me. Is like you can still write to Discord and hear back from Ian, and like there is the mythology and there is the sort of like the template that he helped create. But it can't necessarily eclipse the actual person.
He still hasn't written back to the letter asking him to come on this podcast that Discord PR people asked me to write him. So he doesn't always write back, Dan. No, but I think
I don't.
You guys are true believers.
I don't mind being wrong, Damian. It's fine.
No, you guys are true believers. Like I feel that too. I feel that exactly. This is way better than any other religion, but it did provide a moral compass, and people did and do live and die by these principles. And it did offer us another way, like you said earlier, Andy. Yeah, and it did offer us a unique way to kind of look at the world that is for this higher power. And it's like so different, like the way Fat Mike defines punk to the way Ian MacKaye defines punk, the way each of us will define punk.
And it's
So
a
it's like,
big tent, it's a big
yeah,
tent, like ideas and notions of what it is and what it isn't. I think the irony that I always like find the most interesting and have also definitely lived inside of is that like it is simultaneously like critical of orthodoxy and then creating these little sub orthodoxies that we live and die by and like cling to and cleave to, even as we like beat the drum of fuck all orthodoxy and fuck, like, and I think that's like interesting and like, you live long enough, you eat your words, right? Too.
I think that's the thing that makes it so amazing is because we can do anything in it. We can build it as long as we don't fuck it up. But who's to say what fucks it up except us? And you can kind of create your own orthodoxies within it. And all these weird things will come out of that too. And people's reactions to things, like I bring this up all the time going back to Walter, but I remember reading the interview with Jamie Josta where he's like, yeah, I made Hatebreed because someone told me Quicksand was a hardcore band. And I was like, there's no fucking way that's what hardcore sounds like. And I started Hatebreed to be kind of the anti-Quicksand band. And I'm like, and while I tell that Walter got a little bummed, and I'm like, but how amazing is that you inspired with both swings of the sword? Like, it's like Ian MacKaye writing Straight Edge inspires this whole movement of kids to go straight edge all over the world. But it also inspires the Drinking is Great comp by Poison Idea. And this whole kind of reaction to it too. It's like I love that about punk.
Yeah.
And it's young people and just normal people doing it. It's not like marketing teams being like, all right, though we're going to put X's on their hands. They're going to call it straight edge and it's going to catch on worldwide. Avril Lavigne's going to be doing it. She did.
Well, that's Canada for you.
She also did put Dillinger 4 on a playlist as well. So,
Huh? Don't shut up now.
yeah, it all comes back to punk. Guys, anytime you want to come on and record part twos or threes or more, you're both welcome. This has been awesome having you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It's punk rock bowling time. That's right, for the 24th year. One of the greatest festivals on earth, in my opinion, returns to downtown Las Vegas the weekend of May 25th, 26th, and 27th. I have had some of my greatest times playing this thing and just hanging out at this thing. You want to know how much this festival speaks to Turn Out a Punk's mindset? The headliners are Devo, Descendants, and Madness. Every day of this festival, the lineup is stacked with amazing bands of all types and stripes of punk and hardcore from all different eras, from ska to post-hardcore. We're talking like Bratmobile to Rock from the Crypt to Stiff Little Fingers to the Cosmic Psychos to Scowl to Chat. And then there's also all these late night after shows which are happening. And you wouldn't believe the lineup of these things, from the Zeros to Agnostic Front and everything in between. This festival is out of control for fans of punk. So I hope I will see you there, because this isn't like some sort of festival that you just go to and the bands are secluded in some sort of backstage area. Bands and fans and just punks alike are all just taking over downtown Las Vegas. So you turn around and all of a sudden you're gambling beside John Doe from X. I don't know if John Doe gambles, but if you turn around on the buffet line, you'll probably see me. And you better believe we're going to be talking about punk music. And because this festival loves this podcast as much as this podcast loves this festival, Punk Rock Bowling is bringing you a series of special episodes. So each and every week, I will have an episode going up featuring someone that's playing this festival. And hot damn, are there some good ones coming. Head over to punkrockbowling.com and hopefully I see you in downtown Las Vegas, May 25th, 26th, and 27th.